The silence of that Sunday afternoon cut through the air like a knife. We all sat at the table as usual, my father at one end, my mother on the opposite side, me between them, pretending everything was fine. The smell of roast chicken was the same as every Sunday, but something was different about that day. My eyes met my father's, and he immediately looked away, clenching his fists under the table. Then, without warning, he slowly stood up and said, "Today, it all ends." He placed something on the table. He didn't say anything else, just stared at it and sat back down. My heart raced. My mother stared at him, frozen, as if she already knew what it meant. I couldn't see what it was. I only felt the crushing, almost suffocating tension hanging over us. Everything stopped for a few seconds. The noise of the fan, the ticking of the clock, even my breathing seemed to have stopped. My entire body went on alert, expecting the worst. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. It was as if that phrase had triggered an ancient trigger, buried deep in our family's deepest memories. Today, everything ends. What did he mean by that? And what? The marriage? The lie? Or was it something even more serious? My mind was spinning in circles, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to have no beginning or end. The object on the table seemed to gain weight by the second. My mother took a deep breath and finally asked, "Are you sure what you're doing?" Her voice was shaking, but there was a subtle courage hidden there. My father nodded, his eyes still fixed on the center of the table. I wanted to scream, to run, to ask everything at once, but I froze. A part of me knew we were about to hear something that would change everything, and there was no turning back. In that instant, I realized that wasn't just an announcement, it was a sentence. Something had happened before that lunch, something that grew silently until it could no longer be contained. And now, with a single sentence and a simple gesture, everything was about to come crashing down. My heart was pounding so hard it seemed to echo throughout the entire house. The story that began there was no longer just mine. It belonged to all of us. When I finally managed to look directly at the object, it took a few seconds for my eyes to take in the sight. It was a thick yellowed envelope with my name handwritten on it. The handwriting was my father's, but something about it seemed shaky, anxious. The corner of the envelope was stained, as if it had been wet before, perhaps from sweat or tears. It seemed to contain much more than just papers. It was a bomb waiting to explode. "It's yours," he said quietly, his face locked. "It's all there. You decide what to do with it." My hand trembled as I reached for the envelope. His touch felt electric, heavy, as if it carried years of accumulated secrets. My mother put her hand to her mouth and began to cry silently, trying to contain the sound of her sobs. It was as if the envelope were a confession, or a goodbye. I opened it carefully, tearing the side with my fingers, feeling the rough paper scratch my skin. Inside were several folded pages, some with pasted photos, others with dates and notes. The first line completely stopped me. "Son, the time has come for you to know the truth." My stomach turned. I didn't know what to expect. Betrayal? A crime? Something about myself I didn't know? I looked at my father, but he seemed miles away, trapped in his own guilt. I began to read aloud, hesitantly. Each word felt heavier than the last. There were mentions of a woman named Clarissa, someone I'd never heard of. It spoke of a parallel life, of an accident, of a promise made in desperation. "If you're reading this, it's because I couldn't keep it hidden any longer." My father's words vibrated on the paper, cutting through the air in the room. My mother was now openly weeping. I trembled. He was confessing something monstrous, and at the same time, he seemed to be trying to protect me, as if he wanted to leave me something before it was too late. My world began to spin. Everything I thought I knew about my family was falling apart before my eyes, piece by piece. In that envelope lay a hidden story, buried for decades, and I was part of it, even without knowing it. Clarissa. The name kept echoing in my head like a hammer blow. I'd never heard that name inside our house. It never appeared in a conversation, a memory, a photograph, and yet, in the pages of that envelope, she loomed like an ancient shadow, too present to ignore. My father wrote about her with a mixture of pain and tenderness that left me confused. Who was this woman, and why was she important enough to shatter our Sunday? "She saved my life when I no longer believed in anything," read one of the pages. I couldn't imagine my father, that hard, controlling, cold man, speaking with such fragility, and yet, there it was, written in his handwriting. There were intimate details, a hospital, a road, a secret shared in the rain. It was as if I were reading a diary that was never meant to be read. The pain between the lines was so strong it seemed to pulse in my fingers. My mother rose from the table, her hands shaking. "You had no right," she said, with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. My father didn't respond. He just stared at the floor, as if reliving it all over again. It was then that I realized. She knew. She knew of Clarissa's existence. Maybe she knew everything, and she chose to remain silent for years, living with a parallel history that no one but the two of them fully understood. I kept reading. There was a photo. It was old, worn, and showed my father standing next to a dark-haired woman, smiling. She was pregnant. On the back of the photo, a date written in pen. September 1999, my body froze. I was born in July 2000, and in that instant, the question formed without me being able to contain it. Could I be Clarissa's son? My breath caught. I felt like I was falling inside myself, but there was something my father hadn't written yet, something he seemed to avoid, even within that confession. There was a hole in the middle of the story, a space between forbidden love and the silent present we lived in. Something terrible had happened, and I still didn't know what it was. I only knew that once I found out, there would be no going back. My father rose from the table slowly, as if the weight of his life were on his shoulders. He walked to the sideboard and took a smaller, cleaner sealed envelope from a drawer. He came back and placed it in front of me. "Open this one too," he said. "It's the birth certificate." I stared at the envelope, unable to touch it. I no longer knew if I really wanted to know the truth. Sometimes ignorance feels like a form of protection, but it was too late to back out. I tore the seal. I pulled out the paper. It was a copy of my birth certificate, but not as I knew it. My name was there. My date of birth too. But there was a different field. My mother's name. And in that space, where I always read my current mother's name, there was another name. Clarissa Monroe. Everything stopped. I read and reread, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no. It was there, official, sealed, signed. The woman who raised me was not my biological mother. I felt the ground disappear. My mind flashed back to childhood moments, the cold distance, the quick hugs, the forced I love yous, as if they were obligations. Everything made sense now. Had she raised me because she wanted to, or because she was forced to? And most cruelly, did he hate me for being the symbol of betrayal? I looked up at her, and in her eyes, I saw a sea of contained pain. No words were spoken. None needed to be. The truth was there, stuck within us. My father walked over to me and put his hand on my shoulder. "You have a right to know, and to decide what to do with it." I pulled away. I needed air. I stumbled out of the house, my chest tightening as if nothing else could fit inside. The world outside seemed the same, but everything inside me was different. My entire identity had been rewritten in 5 minutes, and I didn't know what to do with it. I wandered aimlessly through the neighborhood streets, the folded envelope in my pocket, the name Clarissa lingering in my head. Who was she? Why hadn't my father ever told me? Why had my mother, or rather the woman who raised me, accepted this pact of silence? I needed answers, and there was only one way to find them. Find out where Clarissa was now, if she was still alive, and if she wanted to see me. I returned home still dazed, my steps dragging, my head racing. When I entered, my father was still sitting, as if no time had passed. My mother was no longer there. "She went to her room," he said, without looking at me. I sat across from him and could only ask, "Is she alive?" He nodded slowly, as if confirming something that should have been said long ago. "Clarissa is alive, and she knows about you." My heart raced. "She wanted to see you a few times," he continued. "But I asked to wait. That revolted me. I couldn't help but scream, 'Wait, what? She's my mother!'" The sound echoed through the room. My father, for the first time, looked truly shaken. "I thought I was protecting you, but deep down, I was only protecting myself." That hurt more than anything. It wasn't just a lie. It was a theft. He'd taken away my right to choose. He handed me a piece of paper with an address and phone number. "She lives 2 hours from here. If you want, she'll see you." I took the paper as if it were a relic. Here was the key to a chapter of my life that had been denied me for 25 years. I didn't know what I would find on the other side of that journey, but one thing was certain. I had to go. For the first time, this was my decision alone. No one else could choose for me. I went to my room, closed the door, and stared at that address. I tried to picture her face, her voice, her smell. Did I look like her? Did she think of me every day? Or had she moved on and forgotten me? The fear of rejection washed over me like a cold wave. What if she didn't want me? What if all this opened wounds that should never have been touched? Still, I decided I would go. The next morning, I left early, without telling anyone. I got in the car, turned on the GPS, and started driving. The world seemed quieter than ever. Landscapes passed by outside the window, but my mind was stuck on an uncertain future. Every mile brought me closer to a woman who was a part of me, and whom I'd never met. My fingers sweated on the steering wheel. My heart beat like a war drum. I was going to meet the woman who brought me into this world. The GPS said, "You've reached your destination." It was a simple street, lined with old trees and low fences. Her house was the last one on the street, small, with peeling paint and a cluttered garden. I parked in front and stood there for a few minutes, breathing deeply, trying to control my fear. I saw a curtain move. Someone was watching me. I swallowed hard and got out of the car, my legs shaking. Each step toward the door felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed inside the house. The silence afterward was deafening, until the door opened. A woman appeared. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy bun, her eyes sunken and weathered, but there was something about them, something familiar. We stared at each other for a second that felt like an eternity. "Are you?" she asked, her voice weak, as if she feared the answer. I just nodded. "It's me," I replied. And then she cried. She cried as if her soul were being washed clean. She pulled me in with a hug I hadn't asked for, but which I received wholeheartedly. The hug I'd waited a lifetime for without knowing I was waiting. She smelled of lavender and longing. We sat in the living room, among old photos and worn furniture. She looked at me as if trying to memorize my face. "You look so much like him, but you have my look," she said, smiling through her tears. For the first time, I heard my biological mother's voice, and everything changed. We talked for hours. She told me about her pregnancy, about the accident that nearly took her life, about how my father pushed her away to protect everyone. She told me how she tried to return but was always prevented. She showed me photos I'd never seen, letters that never reached me. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle that was finally beginning to make sense. And the more she talked, the angrier I felt at the silence imposed on me for all these years. But amidst the pain, there was a strange sense of relief. I was no longer incomplete. I had found a missing part of myself. We didn't know what to do from there, nor how to build a new relationship. But one thing was certain. The past couldn't be changed. The future could. And I knew I couldn't waste any more time. Late that afternoon, Clarissa led me to the backyard. There was a wooden bench under a tree, with carved marks on the back. "This is where I dreamed of you for years," she said, running her fingers over the worn initials. I sat beside her. The sky was beginning to darken, and the air had that wet, earthy scent that heralds change. "I waited for you in silence. Every birthday, every Christmas." Her voice broke with each word. She showed me a trunk hidden inside the closet. Inside, she kept every little thing that had anything to do with me. My maternity bracelet, a baby shoe, a never-sent letter for my first birthday. It broke me. I knelt on the floor and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Not just from pain, but from the absurd amount of love I never knew existed. Clarissa knelt beside me and held me tightly, like someone holding on to lost time. "I wish you knew me before everything went wrong," she whispered. "I wish I had told you everything myself." Her words stung, but they also healed. There was a kind of love there that had never been tainted, even with distance, even with silence. It was pure love, and I couldn't understand how anyone thought they could spare me from this, stop me from experiencing this. It was like having lived half a life, and only now discovering the rest. She hesitated before saying what would come next. "Your father was never a villain, but he wasn't a hero either." That made me pause. Until then, I'd blamed him for everything, but Clarissa was honest. She told me how he'd been shattered after she nearly died, how he'd tried to create a structure that felt safe, and how he'd lost himself trying to control everything. "He loves you, but he was afraid of what that love could destroy." A sentence that echoed inside me, heavy and real. That night, I slept at her house. It was small, simple, but there I felt whole. For the first time, there was a solid truth beneath my feet. And when I woke the next day, the sun invaded the room with a gentleness that seemed symbolic. It was time to return, but I knew that door would never close again. The part of my life that had been denied me now had a face, a voice, and a name I would never forget. Mother. I returned home 2 days later. I entered silently, my heart torn between gratitude and anger. My mother, or rather, the woman who raised me, was in the kitchen. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "You went to see her," she said, without needing to ask. I nodded, trying not to let the pain leak into my voice. Yes, and I needed that. She looked at me as if unsure whether to apologize or just accept it. We sat on the living room couch, the same place where it all began. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her eyes fixed on mine. It took me a moment to answer. "No, but I need to understand why." She took a deep breath, as if she'd been waiting for this moment for years. "I couldn't have children. When your father appeared with you in his arms, broken, I accepted it. I thought it was fate giving me a chance to be a mother, even though I wasn't." Her confession hurt, but it brought clarity. She didn't hate me. She loved me in her own way, a silent love, shaped by pain and guilt. "I tried to love you as if you were my own, and I guess in a way, you are." I didn't know how to respond, because she was right. She was my mother in every way that everyday life demands. She cared for me, fed me, raised me, and even if the beginning had been a mistake, the journey could not be erased. "You were part of my story. You always will be." Later, I went to talk to my father. He was on the porch, smoking a cigarette, staring blankly at the horizon. I sat beside him in silence. After a few minutes, he asked, "Did she welcome you?" I said yes, and that I forgave her, but I wasn't sure if I still forgave him. He just nodded, as if understanding the gravity of what he'd caused. "I should have told you sooner, but I didn't have the courage. Every time I tried, I felt too weak." His voice was a mixture of weariness and regret. Before falling asleep, I stared at my bedroom ceiling. My entire childhood flashed through my mind like a movie. The birthdays, the punishments, the silent Sundays. Now everything had a new layer, deeper, more human. The truth hurt me, but it also freed me. And despite the pain, I knew I had to move on. With every piece of my story now in my hands, for the first time, I was my own man. 2 days later, the news spread through the family. Someone saw my car on Clarissa's street, and within hours, questions began pouring in. Aunts called, cousins texted. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. My adoptive mother received judgmental calls. The silence that had protected everyone for years was now a scandal, and no one was prepared to deal with it. It felt like I was living through a scandal from a soap opera, only real. People commented as if it were just some drama, ignoring the fact that this was my life. My father, visibly shaken, asked me not to talk about it outside the house anymore, but there was no hiding it anymore. A story buried for so long couldn't resurface without leaving its mark, and the marks were everywhere. My adoptive mother cried often. She said they were treating her like an accomplice to a crime. "I was just a woman trying to love another woman's child," she said, her hands covering her face. I saw her suffering, but I also felt the need to distance myself. That mixture of guilt and pain was suffocating, and although I felt compassion, it was impossible to carry everyone's emotional weight on top of my own. Clarissa called me every night. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand anything. She just wanted to know how I was. Her voice calmed me. It was strange how, in such a short time, she became a presence that always seemed to exist. We didn't talk about the past all the time. Sometimes, just about the day, about a movie she saw, about a meal that reminded her of childhood, small gestures that glued the broken pieces together. I started visiting Clarissa on weekends, in secret at first, not out of embarrassment, but for peace. There, no one looked at me like the boy from the scandal. There, I could exist without having to explain myself. It was like finding a part of my life that had always been missing, and finally being able to breathe fully. Even though I knew that soon, I would have to face the world again. At that time, I learned a hard truth. When the truth comes out, it doesn't just destroy lies. It shatters illusions, masks, and convenient versions, and everyone gets hurt, no matter the side. But even so, I preferred the pain of the truth to the numbing effect of lies. Life would never be the same again, but now at least, it was real. Clarissa asked to speak with her. "I need to look into the eyes of the woman who raised you," she said. I hesitated. I was afraid it would start a war between them, but Clarissa didn't speak with anger or resentment. She spoke calmly, as if she knew this meeting needed to happen. I called my adoptive mother. She took a while to respond, but the next day she agreed. For you, I will. We met in a neutral coffee shop, far from anyone's home. The atmosphere was tense at first. The two women approached with slow steps, their eyes alert. They stared at each other for a few seconds without saying anything. And then Clarissa said, "Thank you for taking care of him." That shattered everything. My adoptive mother tried to respond, but her voice broke. She cried. And then, for the first time, the two women who shaped my life cried together. They talked for almost an hour. It wasn't an easy conversation, nor a light one, but it was honest. Clarissa shared what it felt like to be pushed away. My mother shared what she endured raising me. They both hurt, and there, they could see it in each other. There wasn't immediate forgiveness, but there was respect. And sometimes respect comes before forgiveness, and it can be enough to start something new. I remained silent the entire time, just listening, just feeling. That scene, however unlikely, was all I needed. It was like stitching up an old wound, even if the scar would remain forever. When the conversation ended, the two said goodbye with a long look, filled with everything that couldn't be expressed in words. And then, they each went their separate ways. In the car, Clarissa held my hand. "Now you're free." I stared out the window, unable to answer, because she was right. That conversation didn't erase the past, but it freed me from it. For the first time, I could look at my history without looking away, without hiding holes. It was all there, raw, painful, true, but complete. That night, I lay down and thought about everything I'd experienced in the past few weeks. It felt like a lifetime in just a few days, and I understood. No matter who you think you are, the truth always finds a way to reach you. And when that happens, you either run away or you choose to live with your eyes open. I chose to see. I chose to feel. And most of all, I chose to keep going. I thought I'd heard it all, that all the truths had been told. But weeks later, Clarissa called me in to talk, her eyes restless. "There's something missing," she said. My stomach churned. I sat on her couch, waiting for the blow. "You have a brother." My world froze. She calmly told me. Another son, older, whom she had before me, who was also taken away. For another story, another mistake. He doesn't know about you, or his father, but I couldn't die with that trapped inside me. I remained silent. It was too much information. Another piece of the puzzle I hadn't even known existed. A brother, blood of the same blood. Someone walking around unaware that they had a piece of me inside them. I felt small again, lost, but also grateful that she wasn't hiding it. She showed me an old photo, a thin, serious boy with black hair like mine. His name is Marcus. He's living in California now. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it late? Was it too soon? Clarissa didn't push anything. "If you want, I'll give you his number, but only if you're ready." I saved the number in a notebook. I haven't called yet, but I think about it every day. I returned home with a heavy chest, not with pain, with possibilities. That story that seemed over kept growing, as if life were saying, "You still don't know everything about yourself." My father didn't know. My adoptive mother, even less. And me? I was now a link between two worlds that had almost never met. The responsibility was immense, but the desire to understand was even greater. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The sky was clear, and the silence finally made sense. I thought about Marcus, what it would be like to see him, what it would be like for him to hate me, or embrace me. But more than that, I thought about myself, about everything I'd experienced up until that point, and I realized that everything I needed, I already had. The courage to face the truth, even when it tears me apart. Life isn't solved with a conversation, or with a reunion. It's built day by day, with small truths, big forgivenesses, and difficult decisions. Knowing I wasn't ready for everything yet was part of the process. And maybe, just maybe, being a family isn't just what's said at birth, but what we choose to keep alive. Months later, we sat at the table again. The same lunch table where it all began. It was a calm Sunday. My father plated the chicken. My mother sweetened the juice. And Clarissa, yes, she was there too. No one pretended nothing had happened, but neither did we carry the same burden. There was silence, yes, but it was a light silence, of someone who had already said what needed to be said. I looked around and realized what we had built. An unusual, crooked, scarred family, but a real one. For the first time, everyone sat there knowing exactly who I was, and yet, they loved me. Time doesn't erase everything, but it teaches us how to live with it. And that Sunday, I felt whole, without needing to hide anything. My father looked up and said, "Today, yes, it all begins." The sentence resonated differently. He was trying to redeem himself, but also signaling that he was ready to change. My adoptive mother held my hand under the table. Clarissa smiled discreetly, her eyes welling up. The food was still the same, but the taste was different. It was the taste of a new beginning. We stayed there for hours, telling stories, laughing at silly things, exchanging looks that spoke volumes. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was real. And reality, even if difficult, has a power that no lie can sustain for so long. At the end, Clarissa hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for coming back to me." And all I could say was, I should never have been taken away. On my way out, I saw my reflection in the living room mirror. For the first time, I recognized myself completely, not as the son of lies, but as the man who chose to know his own story, who didn't run from pain, who faced his past head-on and decided to live the present without fear. The pieces of the puzzle didn't fit perfectly, but together, they formed something that finally made sense. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now. Share this video on WhatsApp with someone who needs to hear it, and comment here where you're listening from. I promise I'll read every comment with care. Thank you for sticking around until the end.